Now available in paperback and e-readers. Isis, Bride of Dracula. The Goddess Next Door and John Haynes team up to take on the Dark Vampire Lord in this action-packed Isis series adventure. Get Isis, Bride of Dracula in paperback and e-readers at online booksellers today. Former Batman writer Tom King finds himself in the center of another comics controversy. And this time, your Tom King is caught up in a comics controversy after it was alleged he made several tweets on Twitter attacking legendary comic artist Jay Lee in a racist manner after he found out that Jay Lee had designed some covers for Ethan Van Sciver's Cyberfrog comic. Now, when I take a critical examination of this latest Comicsgate drama, it shows me how weak the leadership is at DC Comics, because your Jim Lee really needed to step in here and let Tom King know who is in charge and let him know the rules as related to a contract worker at a comic book company. Because when you go to work at a company like a Marvel Comics, a DC Comics, or any other publishing house, you are working usually on a work-for-hire basis. And as a work-for-hire employee, you are given an opportunity to work on a project based solely on the permissions given to you by the publisher. So your Tom King, as I see it, doesn't really understand the rules of work for hire, and under those rules, you are usually given a contract to either write a project, draw a project, ink a project, color a project, or design a cover for a project, and you have no investment in that project outside of that because that intellectual property is owned by Warner Brothers and its parent company, AT&T. So your Tom King really does not know his place in the publishing world, and he doesn't understand that as a contract player, your job is to just go out here and write the stories and leave the other tasks to artists and the publisher themselves, because ultimately it is the publisher who has the final say over who draws the interiors for whatever story you write, and it is the publisher who has the final say over what goes on the cover of said project. Tom King has no right to say anything about what goes inside of the interiors as related to the pencils, inks, and colors, nor does he have a say over who designs the covers. No, those decisions are at the sole discretion of Jim Lee, the publisher of DC Comics, and in this case, it's another example of his ineffective leadership, because if he were taking charge, this controversy would not have gotten out of hand during the week of Comic-Con and practically made it where everybody was only talking about this controversy and not the comics being published, because any publisher like myself knows that your product has only one chance to make a positive first impression on the reader. And if your readers are talking about a controversy between the writer and his issues with one of the artists designing a cover, that's going to hurt the momentum for that book and the anticipation for that book in the future, because the readers are going to be soured because they see this friction, and that friction is not going to give them an incentive to go out here and buy the comics. So Jim Lee really messed up at this point as a leader, and he didn't take charge of a situation I would have taken charge, because when I look at your Tom King from the perspective of a publisher, I see an individual who's gotten a really swelled head, and it's my job as a publisher to check that swelled head and let him know what his place is in the publishing pecking order. because it's clear to me Tom King is one of these guys who has an idea that he's some sort of superstar, and he believes that because he's some sort of superstar, he can go out here and dictate who gets to go out here and draw the interiors and who gets to draw the covers on projects for properties he does not own. And that's again where the editor in chief and the publisher pull you to the side and let you know that you are working for hire and you are given the privilege of working on our projects and with our characters and to work with our intellectual properties based on your ability to produce, one, quality stories, and two, your ability to sell regularly. And you do not have any say in who gets to draw what's inside, nor do you get to have a final say on the cover, because these elements are primarily what drive a comic book's sales. And while we like your words and your story, we need you to be a part of the team. And if you're sitting there thinking that you can tell me who to put on certain projects, you're out of order and you don't understand how things work in the publishing industry. Because, again, if he went to any other trade publishing house and threw this type of hissy fit on social media, what would happen to Tom King would be he wouldn't be invited back to work with that publisher ever again. It didn't matter about his sales, it would be about his professionalism, and his unprofessional behavior in this situation was the thing that would alienate many publishers in the trade publishing world, because they're not going to stand for some prima donna writer trying to tell them who to put on their covers when their covers are the thing that they primarily use to sell their books and the thing they use to get the first impression of the reader. And to sit there and alienate a legendary artist like Jay Lee just shows, again, that prima donna attitude that your Tom King has, believing that he can go out of his way to attack an artist based on what he thought he knew about Jay Lee. And when I look at the way he treated Jay Lee, it was highly unprofessional and may have been possibly racist, because when I look at him attacking Jay Lee, talking about he's allegedly a member of Comicsgate, that's no reason to attack that man, a man who would have been helping him get sales for his book. And if he was thinking about this from a business perspective, he would have welcomed Jay Lee designing a cover for his project, because Jay Lee is a legendary comic artist with years in the game and the sales record to back it up. And that cover was only going to help your Tom King, but your Tom King was so caught up in his emotions about the alleged politics that he thought Jay Lee had by allegedly supporting Comicsgate, he could not see the good business being done on his behalf. He couldn't understand that the decision to hire Jay Lee to design the cover for this Rorschach series was meant to get sales for this book. It was meant to build buzz for the book, and it was meant to generate heat for the book. That's what a good publisher does when they go out here and hire a top-tier artist and commission them to do a cover. What they're doing is making an effort to make that powerful first impression on the reader so that they have an incentive to go buy that first issue and be floored by what they read. It's not about politics or any sort of narrative. It's all about business and getting those sales up on a character and getting those orders up. And that's what your DC Comics wanted to do here. Unfortunately, Tom King was so caught up in his identity politics and his loyalty to the the woke faction, that he couldn't understand how business works in the publishing industry. He didn't understand that when it comes down to a publisher's main goal is to get sales, and their goal is to sell as many books as possible. That's why a publisher like DC goes out and commissions an artist like Jay Lee to design their covers, and that's why a publisher like DC Comics goes out of its way to make an effort to reach out to legendary artists like Jay Lee, because they have great faith in writers like Tom King. Unfortunately, Tom King does not appreciate the position he's in, and he does not appreciate the opportunity he has been blessed with. No, your Tom King is so caught up in his feelings over things like your Comicsgate that he cannot think like a businessman like I do, because when I go out here and I'm thinking about a project, I'm thinking about how many units I can sell. And if I had an opportunity to work with a Jay Lee, I'm not thinking about the politics, I'm thinking about the sales, and I'm thinking about the exposure that this product would get with his name attached to it. That's what a business person is thinking like, and that's what Jay Lee was thinking about when he got on this project, because Rorschach is still a popular character from the Watchmen's era, and he's still popular with many comic fans. And this cover was going to be something that probably would have done at least 20 to 25 or 30,000 units, but thanks to this controversy, it may not sell at all. And this is something your Tom King isn't really thinking about, because he thinks he's the star of the show. But I'm here to tell you, as a seasoned publisher and an author of over 70 books, you're not the star of the show. Your characters are supposed to be the ones front and center, and your goal is to get people anticipating the next story featuring your characters and featuring those characters in action. It's not about what you allege the politics of whatever artist or writer is. And that's not for you to have any say on. That's for the publisher to have the final say. When you are a contract player on a work for hire project, your goal is to just write the stories and leave the rest to your editor, leave the rest to the publisher, and collect your check at the end of the day. That is what a seasoned comic pro or publishing pro does. They don't go out here trying to force their politics onto somebody else's intellectual properties. They understand that they have been hired for a job. They have been hired to do a job within certain guidelines, and they understand that they have been hired to do a job that meets a certain commercial standard. If you have an issue with those standards as related to that publisher or that character, you can choose to decline from working on that character, and you can choose to decline from working on that project, but you can't complain when the money isn't there anymore. That's what Tom King needs to understand, because again, when I look at Tom King, I see a writer with an extremely swelled head, and I see a writer who thinks that he's more than what he is, because when you have a writer going out here trying to dictate to editorial and the publisher about what goes on the cover, that's when that writer is really on thin ice professionally, and that's when a really effective leader starts to say, it's time to cut relations with this writer, and it's time to find another writer who will go out here and follow our guidelines, meet our standards, and make sure that our characters remain consistent to what we established them for, because as a work for hire artist or writer, your job is not to tell the publisher who to hire or to hire based on whatever politics you have. Your job is to just do
your job, collect that paycheck, and build your reputation so that you can book more gigs in the future. Because when I look at Tom King, he's not thinking about the future. He's thinking he's going to go on forever, not understanding that these decisions he's making right now are going to lead to him alienating many of the professionals out here, especially the ones in editorial. And those people are looking at this man and saying he's getting out of pocket, he's getting out of control. And they're also looking at Jim Lee and saying he's not doing an effective job of reining in this guy's out of control behavior. And that's just not good for the industry overall, because when I look at this situation from a publisher's perspective, I see a situation that got out of control due to weak and ineffective leadership. And a publisher who was seasoned, again, would have called up your Tom King and let him know that he doesn't get to have final say over covers. He doesn't have final say over interiors. He is a contract player as related to these characters, and he has been blessed with a great opportunity to work with these popular characters, and that opportunity can be taken away if he continues to act in an unprofessional manner. If you want to see me make more videos like this, you can donate to my Patreon, my PayPal, or my Cash App by clicking the links in the description box. And if you want to try some of my SJS Direct publications, like the ISIS series, the E-Steam series, the John Haynes series, and the Spinsterella trilogy, you may check out all of those books in paperback and Kindle formats on Amazon.com, or you can find digital versions on Smashwords, the iBookstore, and Google Play. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe.
Now available in paperback and Kindle Unlimited, ISIS, Escape from Transylvania. The Goddess Next Door and John Haynes must escape a horde of vampires on the hunt in this horror-filled ISIS series adventure. Get ISIS, Escape from Transylvania in paperback and Kindle Unlimited today.